There are very few people in history who became bigger than reality. Michael Jackson wasn't just famous, he became a mythological figure while still alive. And when that happens, facts stop mattering as much as stories. Stories repeated on tabloid covers, stories whispered on playgrounds, stories turned into everybody knows facts, even when they weren't true. Some of these myths followed Michael for decades, some destroyed his image, and some are still believed today, even by people who've never listened to a full Michael Jackson album. Tonight, we're breaking down the biggest Michael Jackson myths people still believe, where they came from, why they spread, and what actually happened. This isn't about defending a legend, it's about understanding how myths are born. This one sounds sympathetic, but it's still a myth. People say Michael never had a childhood, as if he lived in permanent misery. The truth? Michael did have joyful moments as a child. He laughed, he played, he loved music and performing. But his childhood was very different from most. He began performing professionally at 5 years old, rehearsing for hours after school, traveling constantly, and carrying adult responsibilities before he fully understood them. So it's not accurate to say he had no childhood, but it was heavily shaped by work, pressure, and fame. It wasn't a normal childhood, but he still had one. Michael wasn't robbed of happiness. He was robbed of anonymity, safety, and choice. Neverland wasn't an attempt to be a child again. It was an attempt to create a safe space where joy wasn't scheduled, judged, or monetized. A beautiful place where you're free to let all your worries and stresses go away and have innocent fun. But the public often interprets healing behavior as something creepy when it doesn't fit their expectations. The public seeing him as this huge celebrity since 5 years old most likely didn't help with some emotions either, especially when he just wanted to be a kid most of the time during his youth. He couldn't have normal friendships and relationships because most people wouldn't see him for him. They just seen Michael Jackson, the king of pop. They won't deal with him normally.
But it's hard to in my position. I try to sometimes, but people won't deal with me in that way because they see me differently. They won't talk to me like they will the next door neighbor.
He was treated differently almost all the time. And around 24 years old, he experienced friendship for the first time, which isn't normal at all.
And everything seems to be foreign to me or new. And I'm just now beginning to enjoy friendship, which is new for me.
Friendship?
Mm-hmm.
He said he would watch other children play while working long hours, couldn't attend public school, and walked the streets alone looking for someone to talk to when he got older, yet barely anyone could truly understand him or his lifestyle. No one to relate to. Some people dismiss Michael's reflections on his childhood as dramatic, but trauma isn't measured by how it looks from the outside. It's measured by how it feels to the person living it. Michael often spoke about loneliness, anxiety, and fear, themes that appear repeatedly in his music. Art and children became the place where he processed what he couldn't fully explain. When a child grows up being praised, criticized, and controlled by millions, it shapes how they see themselves, often permanently. The emotional weight of fame began long before adulthood. In reality, Michael didn't want to be a child. He wanted to experience the parts of childhood he missed. Things like amusement parks, water fights, cartoons, and games weren't about immaturity. They were about reclaiming something that fame took away too early. Michael Jackson's childhood wasn't a simple tragedy, and it wasn't a fairy tale either. It was a childhood shaped by talent, pressure, discipline, love, fear, and global fame. Because before the icon, there was just a child trying to survive the spotlight. This is one of the most damaging myths ever attached to Michael Jackson, that he somehow wanted to erase his Black identity. The evidence people point to is always the same: his changing skin tone, his straightened hair, his increasingly pale appearance. But here's what almost never gets mentioned. Michael Jackson was diagnosed with vitiligo, a medical condition that causes the skin to lose pigment in patches. It's irreversible, and it becomes more visible over time. By the late 1980s, his skin tone wasn't changing, it was disappearing unevenly. Michael chose to even out his skin tone using makeup and medical treatments, not to become white, but to avoid looking patchy on camera, on stage, and in public. He didn't deny his blackness. He talked about it openly.
Why would I want a white child to play me? I'm a black American. I'm proud to be a black American. I am proud of my race. I am proud of who I am. I have a lot of pride in who I am and dignity. It's a problem for me, okay? I can't control it.
He supported black artists. He broke racial barriers on MTV. He spoke about racism in interviews and music. But once the tabloids decided on a story, the truth stopped mattering. Because a myth that shocks spreads faster than a fact that explains. In the end, no matter what anyone says, Michael Jackson himself said he loved his skin color and being a black American man. He was always proud of his race and people. You can't fully control or cure vitiligo. His demographic doesn't change because his appearance changed slightly. He's still Michael Jackson, still has African DNA. He had to adjust to the changes his body was going through. As anyone in the spotlight would do, there really wasn't anything he could do, especially at that time, when less was known about it rather than if a celebrity was diagnosed with it today. But people would rather not understand that and say ridiculous things like, he was bleaching and just turned white. No, it doesn't work like that. He was a black man with vitiligo. Michael Jackson did have plastic surgery, but the myth is that he had dozens and dozens of procedures purely out of vanity. Lies made up to make money off Michael's name and make headlines. The truth is more complicated. Michael suffered severe scalp burns during the Pepsi accident in 1984. That injury caused lasting damage, pain, and hair loss, which led to reconstructive procedures. He also admitted to having a small number of cosmetic surgeries, mainly on his nose. Michael Jackson said he got his first procedure because of a broken nose, and got a few more in the following years. You can count them on one hand. The later changes came from touch-ups on the nose, not full-on procedures. Michael's nose was in bad shape during the late 80s, leading up to the 2000s. In a state of collapse, but he fixed it with small amounts of filler and regular taping. He also added a cleft to his chin around 1986 to 1987. Reports say for a more enhanced and masculine appearance, but many of the changes people noticed over the years weren't surgery at all. They were weight fluctuations, makeup, lighting, hairstyles, aging under extreme stress. Michael lived under a microscope from childhood. Every pore, every angle, every bad day became front-page news. When people expect transformation, they start seeing it everywhere, even when it's not there. This myth became so famous that people still reference it as a joke. Michael Jackson floating inside a glass tube, trying to live forever. Here's the reality. Michael posed for a single promotional photo with a hyperbaric oxygen chamber, a real medical device used to treat burns and injuries. He was curious about it, that's it. But tabloids took one image and turned it into a personality trait. Suddenly, he wasn't a man interested in medical science. He was a mad scientist obsessed with immortality. The myth stuck because it was visual, strange, easy to mock. And once people laughed at it enough, they stopped asking if it was real. This is the most dangerous myth of all, that the story is obvious, that there's nothing left to question. Michael Jackson was investigated multiple times by law enforcement. He was put on trial. He faced the most intense scrutiny any celebrity has ever experienced in the public eye. Yet Michael Jackson was never convicted of any crime involving child abuse. In 2005, after a highly publicized trial, he was found not guilty on all charges. That verdict doesn't mean people aren't allowed to have opinions, but legally, guilt was never established. He was proven innocent every single time. And yet people still talk as if rumors are verdicts. Here's why this myth survives. Because uncertainty is uncomfortable, and myths give people emotional closure, even when they're wrong. Once someone decides who Michael Jackson was, they stop listening. And in a world driven by headlines instead of evidence, repetition becomes truth. This may be the biggest myth of all. The truth is not simple, not comfortable, and not universally agreed upon. Some people believe the allegations. Some believe he was innocent. Others believe the situation exists somewhere in between. What is clear is that media coverage, public opinion, and emotion often replace careful examination. How much more proof could these people who believe he did these things need? He was acquitted on all charges. End of story. Michael Jackson existed at the perfect intersection of fame, fear, and fantasy. He was too famous to be human, too different to be understood, too private to correct every lie. And tabloids didn't just report on him, they created a character that was easier to sell than the real person. Once that character existed, every new story had to fit the myth, not the man. And multiple years later, people still confuse the two. Michael Jackson wasn't just a celebrity, he was a global symbol. When someone becomes larger than life, people stop seeing a person and start projecting ideas, fears, and expectations onto them. Fame at that scale doesn't just amplify facts, it amplifies rumors. More than a decade after his death, Michael Jackson remains one of the most discussed and misunderstood figures in modern history. Despite court verdicts, documentaries, books, and endless debate, myths about him refuse to disappear. Some rare positive headlines about Michael Jackson sold records, but negative ones sold more. Sensational stories attracted attention, ratings, and clicks. Over time, speculation was often presented with the same weight as evidence. When a story is repeated enough, even if flawed, it begins to feel true to some out there. Myths about Michael Jackson still exist not because the truth is hidden, but because the truth is messy. Michael Jackson once said, "People make up stories about me because they don't know me. Myths don't need evidence. They need repetition." And the reason so many Michael Jackson myths still exist is because they were never challenged loudly enough. Not because they were true, but because they were convenient. Because sometimes the most unbelievable thing is the truth. That's why so many of us as moonwalkers and soldiers of love will always and forever defend Michael no matter what. We simply know and believe the truth. Michael Jackson was a pure soul put here on earth to teach us how to love and connect as one. His music and actions were so influential, a true humanitarian. MJ put others before himself, but the world was too harsh for his genuine heart. If you want more deep dives like this, into music legends, pop culture myths, and the stories behind the headlines, don't forget to comment, like, and subscribe. Also tell me what you would like to see in the future. I love you all. Thanks for watching.